Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Huck. Today I'm doing a review for the Light Isle Saga by Juliet Marillier, which consists of Wolfskin and Foxmask. So this is a Norse-inspired historical fantasy companion duology, which is also a generational story because in the first book we're following three main characters, and then in the second book we're following some of the children of some of those characters from the first book. So I am going to kind of talk about each of the books individually because they are kind of each their own complete stories. However, they should still be read in order. And I will have content warnings listed in the description of this video. So the first book is Wolfskin, and in this we're following three perspectives, as I said, but our main character is Eyvind, and we're following him from childhood through young adulthood as he is training and then becoming a young Wolfskin, which is kind of like a berserker who is dedicated to Odin. His childhood best friend is Summerlead, who is from a noble family, and when they were children, the two of them make a pact as blood brothers, which later causes problems as Summerlead becomes increasingly cruel and ambitious. And then as they are young adults, they both end up on this expedition to a group of islands that they are going to colonize, which I think are loosely based on the Orkney Isles, which I think are near Scotland. On these islands, they encounter the people who already live on these islands, and they could have lived with these people in peace, but Summerlead in particular has other plans. And this puts Eyvind in a very difficult position where he has to choose between doing what is right or honoring his blood oath to Summerlead and their blood brotherhood. So next I want to talk about the characters. So Eyvind, as I said, is a Wolfskin, so he's kind of like a Viking berserker type character. He's a warrior, but he also is very kind-hearted. He is loyal to a fault, and he really wants to believe the best in people, which sometimes, to his own detriment, it's like sometimes it causes a problem for him. But he's also very focused on winning glory for himself, for his king, and for his god, because he is dedicated to Odin. His character does grow over the course of the book, and by the end of the book, I did like his character. But before his growth arc, his character is kind of boring because he feels kind of one note, because his character is like so single-minded. Then another one of our main characters is Summerlead, who, as I said, comes from a noble family. He is very clever and manipulative and tricky and cruel and ambitious, and is really willing to do anything to get what he wants in his quest for power and control. And the friendship between Eyvind and Summerlead is really a central part of this book and this story. I've seen some people describe it as almost like a Thor-Loki dynamic relationship, which I think it definitely has some elements of that. However, Summerlead is definitely like a darker take on the Loki type character because he definitely has all of Loki's negative qualities and then some, with none of Loki's redeeming or endearing qualities. He's definitely a much darker character who does much more like unforgivable things, and he just becomes this like very unlikable character. I felt like he's almost like a Loki, like Ramsay Bolton combination kind of character, if that like could give you a vibe as to what type of character Summerlead is. And then Eyvind is just like too honorable and too trusting, and sometimes it makes him kind of dumb, and it just has like really bad consequences. And there's so much of the plot in this first book that like just would not have happened if Eyvind had been willing to accept that Summerlead is a terrible person, and that, you know, maybe there are times where you just have to not honor that blood pact that you made in a tree when you were like 11, you know? But that is also very much part of Eyvind's growth as a character, because he starts out being like overly honorable and not wanting to like think too hard about things, but part of his growth journey throughout the book is figuring out when things have gone too far and like what is truly honor. So his character does grow a lot, which I appreciate. And then there is also a third character who comes in kind of later in the book once they get to these islands, because she is a priestess of the island who is named Nessa. And so she is very connected to the island and the people and the magic of this island. She, as a character, she is very intuitive. She's much more balanced as a character than the other two. And she's actually much more similar to the type of character that I think Marillier usually writes, and usually writes as a main character in her books. And she does get a perspective in the book, but I think Ivan is definitely like the main character. And overall, I really liked Nessa as a character, and I also really liked that parts of her story kind of take on parts of the story of the Trois sisters, or the two sisters, and the Bone Harp, which is a story that I have mentioned in other videos I really enjoy. So I liked that that was kind of incorporated into parts of her story. So overall, for this first book, I found this book a little bit hard to motivate myself to read, and part of that is because I found the characters kind of frustrating. I also felt like this first book was kind of heavy-handed with the like foreshadowing that just gave it this really ominous feeling, and it just felt like we all know that this is going to go badly. We know where this is going, and I just like don't want to go there. So that also made it kind of hard to motivate myself to read this. But I did like the ending of this book, and I feel like the ending kind of brought it all together and made me enjoy the whole book more. Partially because I really liked the way that everything came together in the end, but also because you get to see these character arcs come to fruition. And like, I think that they are really well written character arcs. There is a lot of character growth, especially for Ivan, and it is very satisfying at the ending. So I did really like the end of Wolfskin. Now, talk about Foxmask, the second book. So in this one, we're following some of the children of characters from the first book. One of the characters that we're following has grown up not knowing his father, and not knowing who his father was. But at the beginning of the book, his mother has decided that he is old enough that she has just finally told him who his father is, and that his father might still be alive somewhere out there. And so he decides to set out to find his father and maybe find out more about himself. Some of his friends then join him on this journey, and they end up on this other group of islands, which are loosely based on the Faroe Islands, which I think are somewhere between Iceland and Norway, I think. But they get sucked into this like years-long war between the people of two of these islands, which involved like stealing people back and forth, stealing children, stealing a spiritual leader. And then there also involves this like third island that's this kind of mystical, mysterious, magical island that can only be visited once a year. So they get like sucked into this whole like complicated situation. So the characters in this one, there are really two main characters that we're following, but there's also a third one who's kind of there. So one of our main characters is Thorvald. He is the one who is searching for his father. And part of why he's searching for his father, other than just wanting to find his father, is because he feels like there is some kind of darkness within him that he doesn't know what it is or how to explain it. And so he's hoping that by finding his father, he'll find out more about himself and maybe like where this darkness comes from and what that means about him as a person. He, as a character, is very clever and very determined, but he also is very self-centered and very selfish, and he doesn't really value other people, even his friends, and he can get very like tunnel vision about his goals. Another one of our main characters is Cray, who I would say is actually our main character, and I am not sure how her name is pronounced because I listened to the audiobook and they pronounced it Cray. However, I will put on the screen the way it is spelled, so I'm very confused as to how to pronounce it. I'm gonna go with Cray because that's what they said in the audiobook, so I'm assuming that they are correct. Anyways, Cray is a childhood friend of Thorvald and is kind of in love with him, and when he sets off on this journey, she stows away on the ship because she is hoping, one, to help him, but also is kind of hoping that by helping Thorvald in his quest that he will somehow realize that they're actually like meant to be together. As a character, she is very wholesome and very devoted and really just wants like a simple life. She starts out kind of naive and she is very single-minded and just refuses to accept that Thorvald has negative qualities, even though he's like kind of the worst. But she also has a lot of growth over the course of the book, and we find out that she's the kind of character who is very brave and really never gives up and is very resourceful in ways that maybe we as readers never would have expected, maybe she never would have expected of herself, except that she is put in some terrible situations and learns these things about herself. So I think that she does have this really interesting internal arc of learning not to idealize people and also learning like who deserves her devotion. And then there is also a third character who comes with them, who is their friend Sam, who is just, he's the guy with the boat. It's his boat that they take. And I just feel so bad for him that he gets dragged along on this whole thing because he doesn't want to be there. This isn't his quest. He also just is like, he's a fisherman. He's just like having a happy, simple life. And then they take his boat and like, he gets involved in this, and I just feel bad for him. He's less of a focus. He's not really a main character. He's just sort of there, and he did not deserve to have to go through all of this nonsense. So overall, for this book, I think that this one felt maybe a little more magical. It incorporates more of the uncanny into the story. The first book definitely also had like magic and the uncanny and all of that, but I think that it was just like more consistently throughout the Foxmask. But this one I also, again, kind of had a hard time motivating myself to read this book, and part of it is because these characters were really frustrating, especially Thorvald's selfishness and Cray's naivete. It just like pushed my buttons in a way that I just can't even explain. Other people may not find them as frustrating as I did, but it just made it difficult for me to motivate myself to keep reading. But the thing is, I think like that's part of the point, like they're meant to be imperfect, and I think maybe part of what I found so frustrating is that they are flawed in a way that feels very realistic, and so it makes it really annoying. So now I want to talk about my thoughts on the duology as a whole. Of course, this does have Marillier's signature beautiful writing and folkloric storytelling and that very magical feeling in the incorporation of folklore and the uncanny, which I really enjoy. I think there were some interesting parallels between these two books because we have these two generations of these families, and seeing parallels between the characters and their character arcs and growth and the lessons that they have to learn. And sometimes we see that like these people have the characters in the second book have to learn some of the same lessons as their parents had to learn in the first book, and I enjoyed seeing those parallels between them. It had a lot of themes of loyalty and honor and also having faith in people, even sometimes to their own detriment or to the detriment of others. And I think that this is a pretty consistent theme in a lot of Marillier's books, is this idea of having faith in people and believing that people can change and grow and overcome their demons. And as a whole, that's a theme that I really love. but I think it is one that there is a fine balance to, and usually I think that Marillier does a great job of having that balance in using that theme in her books. But in this one, I felt like the characters would often kind of go beyond that tipping point, to a point where they would just do things that just felt stupid and would put themselves and other people in danger because they just refused to give up on someone even when it was so clear that they should. And yeah, so in this instance, although I love that theme, I felt like the balance was a little off for me, and that was part of my frustration with this series and with these characters. But that also does tie into the character arcs of both of these books, because part of the growth that some of these characters have to go through is learning when something has gone too far and like how they should use like having faith in people, or how that, you know what, that sentence didn't totally make sense, but you get what I'm saying. And you know what, from this I was like, you know, Marillier can write a really good character arc. In this series, I think these characters started out more flawed than most of the characters start out in a lot of her other books. And so they needed a lot more growth. But the character arc the arc that they go through and the ways that they grow, I think are really well done. And so by the end, it is very satisfying to see how they have grown and the lessons that they have learned. So it is very satisfying in that way, but oh my god, they are annoying in the process, at least for me. This is the thing, is I keep going back and forth about like, how much will this bother other people or not? Because I think there are certain things about these characters that very specifically like push my buttons in a way that may not annoy other people as much as it annoyed me. This is not my favorite series by Juliet Marillier. There are things about it that I did enjoy. There are things that I can really appreciate, especially, I keep talking about these character arcs, but I do think they're really well done. But this is definitely not my favorite series that I have read from her. But I gave Wolfskin 3.5 stars and Foxmask 3 stars. So I would love to know if any of you have read this series, and if you have, what you thought of it, how you feel it compares to her other series. If you haven't read it, let us know if you're planning to. But thank you all for watching, and until next time, bye!